Well, the DR650 is old. How old, you may ask? About 33 years at this point. In 1990, the first DR650 was released to replace the DR600. You might be saying to yourself, well, that's too old. This is old tech. But the DR650 wasn't made for a specific period of time. The DR650 is timeless. This bike is simple, this bike is reliable, and this bike is for the rider who understands that just throwing on a larger fuel tank will afford you all the freedom of the world. You can go and get lost and not come back for days with no issue. This bike is so timeless that one day, us as owners will be old riders and everything will be electric, but we will still be talking about our adventures and the fun we had with the DR. Why? Well, this is not an adventure bike, and it's not lighter like a dual sport. It's somewhere in between. It sits in a sweet spot middle ground. It's capable of doing anything. I've taken this motorcycle on the highway, through the deepest of sand, all the way up into mountains, and I've even camped off it for 5 days straight. Everything I throw at this bike, it craves more. So let's break down the DR650. What's up, my 22,500 subscribers and the 91% of you who have not subscribed but still watch. I've been going for a little while. I've been on vacation. I did a motorcycle trip, but I'm back now and I wanted to come back strong, and this is why I started with the DR650 full video review. So hopefully this video earns your sub and I can get closer to the 30,000 subscriber mark. That is my personal goal. Also, I'd just like to say I really appreciate all you who watched the video to the end, and if you do, let me know in the comments below so I can give you one of those hearts. Well, that's about it. Let's break down the full review. This is my DR. What year is it? Well, it doesn't really matter. They have mostly gone unchanged. I feel the DR fits a strange class occupied only by 2 bikes currently. And that class kind of falls in a bit heavy for dual sport, but a bit light for ADV. For how much value you get out of something like the KLR 650 or the wonderful power you get from the Tenere 700, you have to admit they're both a bit heavy, and most of us can't control them in hairy situations off-road. The DR650 comes in at around 100 pounds less than those other 2 bikes. Don't worry, I didn't forget about you XR650L guys. But that bike needs a video all on its own, and to be completely honest, it's not approachable for many other riders because of the combination of its weight and its seat height. But the DR, I feel, falls in the sweet spot of light ADV. It allows the power for these bigger machines and a versatility almost like a lighter machine off-road. The only other competitor in this area I would say is the KTM 690, and some people can point out that the KTM 690 may be better in almost every single way. You have fuel injection, it's better balanced, it has a 6 gear. But one big factor though, the KTM is still expensive used, and you can literally buy 3 super clean DR650s for the out-the-door price of the KTM 690 Adventure. You have a very unique dual sport, still sold new in most markets today, that can fit the bill of an ADV bike. A few modifications can get you a long way. And by the way, if you want to talk about mods, I will address what I think is the most essential mods for each type of riding later on in the video. But let's continue with the review. If you happen to be one of those people that's trying to choose between the DRZ400 and the DR650, I feel like for most people the DR650 would be a better fit. The DRZ is overall a better off-road machine, but the versatility of the DR650 is in a league all of its own. Not to mention the seat height for most people is very appealing. At adjusted to its lowest seat height, it sits at 33 inches or 845 millimeters. Also, another huge thing to mention here is the aftermarket. I don't think there's many bikes on the market that have a huge aftermarket like the DR650. I mean, you can change every single thing to your liking all the way up to a 790 big bore kit. I'm saying complete customization for exactly what you want this motorcycle for. Can I see the bottom? I think I can. I'm already across. Performance. The DR650 is a bizarre motorcycle in that it is an air-cooled engine, but it's also sporting an oil cooler. Air cooling meaning, of course, you have larger tolerances and you can't quite eke out every bit of horsepower as some of the competitors. But this also means bulletproof reliability, and that's a fair trade-off in my opinion. You can just go to any forum and any Facebook group for the DR and ask how durable or how reliable this motor is. I'm sure you'll be greeted with many true-to-life experiences saying the same. So how good is this 650 244cc engine, well, at the crank the engine's producing a little over 40 horsepower, but a very formidable 47 foot-pounds of torque. The great thing, and like the DRZ400 when I mentioned in its review, is where the power comes on. It's low in the RPM range, making the bike very ideal for off-road. Interestingly enough, the dyno charts show the DRZ and the DR650 having similar horsepower, but the low-end torque of the DR650 really makes it stand out and leaves a smile on your face. I mean, these torque numbers are close to what I was getting on my Tenere 700. That's very impressive for the old school air-cooled beast. As far as highway, you would think you need a 6-speed transmission, but the gearing is spaced so well, it's a pretty comfortable bike at speeds 75 miles an hour or 120 kilometers an hour, which I think is pretty much the sweet spot for long highway travel. It's somewhere around 65 to 75 miles an hour. Basically, if you have doubts about this motorcycle on road, need not to worry. One big thing on the highway to leave you wanting is probably the seat. I sat on a DR in a showroom, and it's best described as a block of wood. Alright, it's not that bad, but luckily for me, my gently used secondhand DR came with a sergeant seat already installed. Let's also talk about the range here. With mine on its aftermarket carburetor, I got exactly 140 miles, which is 225 kilometers on the stock tank, and that was a mix of gravel roads, single track, and highway of that day. I carried an extra fuel cell, I ran her completely dry, filled her back up, and she started up like a charm. I tell you this because for most people that might be limiting, but there's some great aftermarket fuel options out there, so if you are looking to travel far or looking to fill up, let's say once a week on your commute, you'll still have no problem with this motorcycle. Okay, stay tuned guys. Next I'm going to talk about my experiences off-road. Off-road. Where to begin with off-road? Well, I can't sit here and tell you that this bike is the most amazing thing off-road. In fact, it's just mediocre or pretty good at best, but it will generally take you anywhere you point it. It is also obvious it will not be the bike more fit for the task. If it was a super hard ride, where I don't have to ride out to the riding spot, I would prefer my KDX 200. I think that's fine for the DR though, because most people who ride dual sports just want to ride some trails, explore, maybe hit some single track, and this bike will do all of that without an issue. The bike comes with a solid 21-inch spoke wheel, which is great for smashing over things with little to no effort, but it only has a 17-inch rear. Not too big of a deal, but some people change it out to an 18. The only real problem I see with the 17-inch rear is that if you're looking for a super aggressive off-road tire, your selection is kind of limited, as an 18-inch is now the new mainstay. But with the nature of this bike, I think you have plenty of options out there. I went with a Pirelli MT21 in the front and a K60 Ranger in the rear. I drilled my own rim locks just so I can lower the pressure when it's needed, and with this tire combination, the bike works pretty amazing. On a side note, if you want to know how to install rim locks, how to swap out your bearings, or anything like that with this motorcycle, everything I've done for it I've been documenting on my Patreon, and you can go check it out. I post a bunch of stuff there, and it's pretty awesome. I have a huge selection of videos over there. But as I said in the beginning of the video, I did take this bike through everything, and it could handle it all pretty well.
There we go, guys. You ready? Shit to get dicey.
But there is one thing I want to make you aware off-road. It falls into ergonomics of the bike and how it translates off-road. The bike feels kind of cramped, so most people to fix this is they install bar risers and lower the foot pegs. Well, I didn't do the foot pegs, but I can say in rocky terrain or log hops, you will bounce the pegs off the obstacles. Just listen closely. I didn't see that rock, but it hit my foot peg and my skid plate. This will also happen when you're trying to traverse deep ruts. Maybe you fall into it, you're trying to ride it out, and the pegs will rub the sides a bit. The DR doesn't have the highest of ground clearances, and this is due to the lower seat height, the lack of suspension travel, and just overall being a relatively big motorcycle. When it comes to single track on this bike, I found it to do pretty well. I can put a couple examples on screen, and keep in mind, as I'm doing this single track, I'm loaded down with all of my camping gear, as most of this was filmed when I was on my camping trip on this particular motorcycle. Now that brings me to the next point, which is the suspension. For road, light trails, gravel roads, the soft suspension would probably feel great, especially if you're 180 pounds or less. I don't see a problem. My particular bike has aftermarket suspension, which is definitely needed for my moto camping rig because, well, I'm carrying all my gear. Now, another great positive is the transmission. If you had told me a year ago that I would ride a DR650 and praise it for its 5-speed transmission, I would ask you, what are you drinking and where can I get me a bottle that strong? But it's true. I do prefer 6-speed transmissions, but the DR has such legs that the 5-speed is almost convenient. I still find myself always keeping 2 fingers on the clutch in case I need to feather it for gear changes, etc. But pretty much a lot of the off-road with this motorcycle, you can just sit in second gear. With the wide range of speed, you can basically do almost anything, and it's very beginner friendly. I would have to say off-road, when it comes to performance, the bike can climb anything, the bike pulls through anything, and yes, it's not as powerful as my Tenere 700 was, but I feel much more comfortable. It's probably due to the lower seat height and, well, 100 less pounds. That makes a huge difference. Dare I say this was one of the most 50-50 motorcycles I have tested on the channel, where we're close to as capable off-road as we are on-road. If that sounds like what you really want to do, this might be the perfect bike for you. Looks and aesthetics. Now, all my reviews, I like to cover the looks and aesthetics, even though it is a bit subjective. It also can give some people pointers of what to do to really streamline your motorcycle to look more aggressive or up to today's standard. There's just a few things on the DR that I would change. Number one is the big floppy fender. This thing just flops around and it looks really ridiculous. A lot of people make a bracket that they can bolt to it to keep it more sturdy, or in my position, I bought my bike with the Supermoto fender. I don't particularly like the Supermoto fender. I would much rather go with the DRZ fender, and that gives you some more aggressive lines that flow through the bike. Next is your turn indicators. These are big, gaudy, and they're probably going to break on sticks or when you drop the motorcycle, so it's just a good idea to get some aftermarket LED turn indicators. They can help you be seen, they use less draw on the stator, and are less likely to break. Next, I want to mention these mirrors. These mirrors are, let's say, utilitarian. They're big, bulky, and goofy. I always piecemeal my mirrors together with my own custom ram kit. You can buy the threaded ball, the ram arm, and the mirror for pretty cheap if you buy them all separately. Now, the next thing you'll hear people complaining about is the looks of the fuel tank. Because it doesn't have shrouds, it's all one piece. But honestly, I don't really mind it. I think it looks good on the motorcycle, and also most people are going to buy an aftermarket fuel cell, which is going to change the aesthetic anyway. For me, I actually liked the gas tank. I felt like the size was adequate, and it didn't make it feel really wide. Kind of if you ever rode a Tenere or something, the gas tank is so wide it makes the bike feel taller. The DR's doesn't, so I wanted to keep that feel. So I added my own custom bracket and put a Rotopax type can on the bike itself. But other than that, when you buy a motorcycle like this, you know what you're getting. You either like this style or you don't. Alright, let's talk about the mods. If you have this motorcycle, or if you're looking to get one, you are fortunate to have so many modifications to completely customize this bike for whatever you need. First, let's talk about the daily commuter. If you're somebody that wants to go back and forth from work with this motorcycle, you can completely do it with no problems at all. I would suggest a larger fuel tank. I would either go with an aftermarket seat, or you can find this gel that I used for my Tenere. You take the seat cover off, you cut out an area, you custom fit it under the seat, and it feels much better, although it's not going to be better than something that you're paying hundreds of dollars with aftermarket, but it could get you by. Also, while you have the seat open, you might as well put heated seats in there. They're pretty inexpensive. I would also say bar risers and foot pegs, and I found really cheap bar risers and foot pegs on Amazon. And also, anything you want that I'm talking about here to get off Amazon, you can use my affiliate link down below, and I get like a 2% kickback if you click on that affiliate link and buy anything from Amazon for that matter, let alone these mods. But I did separate what I'm talking about now into its own category called DR650 mods. So after the video, go check that out. Maybe some of that stuff you might want to pick up. And really, this motorcycle's ready to go. Since it does pull the speed off the front wheel, you could also add one more tooth to the front sprocket, or maybe 3 from the rear. If you want to get slightly longer legs out of the motorcycle, basically you're going to be sitting at a lower RPM at highway speeds, so that might be something you're interested in. And then on the other side are the people that want to make it like more of an off-road bike, which number one is your tires, of course. I think the gearing off-road is completely fine. I don't think you need to mess with that too much. Though mine does have an aftermarket carburetor and aftermarket exhaust, it's not necessary. The stock dyno numbers prove that this is a very formidable bike. Once again, bar risers, foot pegs. I would get aftermarket bars. I like the CR high. The problem with this bike as it is in the stock position, at least for me, is I'm 5'10". I think that's 178, 180 centimeters tall. Is when you're holding the bars, you kind of lean a little bit far forward because you're trying to reach, and it kind of throws your balance off a bit. So bar risers are definitely a must if you're taking off-road, and then a CR bend high. That's what I went with. I went with a slightly higher sweep, some risers, all my wires could still connect, and it actually looked really good, and it was very functional for me. Now, of course, it's not going to be, you're not going to be down on top of the bike like you are some sort of dirt bike, but most of the riding you do on this bike is not going to be, you know, hard enduro, so you want something that's a bit taller, in my opinion. The lower foot peg, some people do that. I didn't do it. That's personal preference, I guess. I think it's okay without it, but if you're a taller rider, maybe you would want to do it, or maybe you might want a bigger bike. Taller rider, that might be where the XR650L fits in. This motorcycle is very nice for an average or shorter rider. But at the end of the day, who this motorcycle is really for is for anyone that has room for only one motorcycle or can only afford one motorcycle and they want that bike to do it all. This bike is very reminiscent and gets the same props to me as something like the CRF 300L Rally, where it can do a lot of different things and it doesn't need to specialize in any one thing, and it just gets you out there biking. It just gets you on the road, gets you out with your friends, gets you on the single track. It'll do it all, and that's what I really like about this motorcycle, and that's kind of my preference in motorcycles in general, and that's probably why I like the 300 platform so much. There's not too many motorcycles out there that I can recommend for somebody to be the one do-it-all bike. Now, me personally, I have a more aggressive bike, and then I like to keep a more adventure style bike separately, but not everybody can do that. But you can absolutely build this out to be your do-it-all. And it's not terribly expensive as well, so that's another good thing. As far as a beginner, this is a hard one. See, I would never think I would recommend something like a 650cc bike for a beginner, because it's a little bit heavy as well, and it does have the power, but you really have to intentionally use that power. And I hate this phrase, but I might use it for this motorcycle. It's a bike that you can grow into. I hate that phrase, because it's just not fundamental to riding in general. Generally, you should get yourself something small like a 250, learn how to ride it for a year or two, then gradually move up. This motorcycle, you may be able to do all that, especially if you're a bigger guy. 600cc motorcycle might be your first road motorcycle, and dual sports are like the best motorcycles to learn on the road, I feel. You know, you don't want something that's like a sport bike that can scream to 14,000 RPMs. You want something forgiving that you can beat up, that you can drop. You can do whatever you want with it, and this bike is that. So it may be a good beginner bike. Honestly, if you can find one for a good deal like I have, somewhere around $3,000, you should buy it, because that's the same thing you're going to pay for like an XT250, and it's half as much as you're going to pay for like a Honda CRF 300L. So at that value, this is a great motorcycle. So hopefully that gave you some insight if it's for you and what mods to do. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today, and I'm trying to tighten up my schedule so I can put out maybe 2 videos a week. So I hope you enjoy the content, and please, if you have not, subscribe and turn the notifications on so it can help me and help the channel reach our goals. This is something I really look forward to, and I can only do it with your help. So guys, stay safe out there, keep riding, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.